Well, welcome back, everybody, to a very special Tech Whispers episode, and one that I've been wanting to do for a very, very long time. So thanks to my team, Tracy and Marla, and especially Ryan Becker for helping me pull this together. Today, we are shining the light on the best of the best episodes of the Tech Whispers podcast. As you know, over the past almost 4 years, we've had the privilege of sitting down with over 100 of the most visionary, the most impactful digital and technology leaders of our time. These folks have been incredibly gracious. They've been very transparent, very open. They've opened up their playbooks to us. They've talked about transformation, innovation, modernization. They've talked about successes and failures, very, very open about that, the lessons learned from those things. So buckle up and get ready to learn from these great snippets. But before I go any further, I want to share one important, very critical point. I don't believe that a podcast host should have favorite episodes, just as a parent shouldn't have favorite kids. So I just wanted to make that point right now. So we've leaned on the data to compile for you the top 6 episodes, most watched, most listened to episodes. And they're going to include Deneen DeFiore, Frank LaQuinta, Abidar, Sean Banerjee, Martha Heller, and Rob Carter. You know these people. They're fantastic. And so if you haven't heard the episodes, the initial episodes, don't worry. We're going to include show links so that you can go back and listen to their full episode, knowing you're probably going to want to do that after you hear these clips. So strap yourself in. This is going to be a leadership masterclass, and we're going to have some fun here. So check it out.
I think there's, a couple of aspects that you have to think about in any transformation, or if you're achieving kind of your North Star goal, right? That aspirational goal that you want to set and achieve. And I think the first thing it really needs to be is being what I call brilliant at the basics. So setting those table stakes and making sure that those baseline, in my case, cybersecurity protections, regulatory compliance obligations are there, and that we are able to maintain those as a course of doing business, doing DT, doing technology, doing digital, right? So making sure that we have vulnerability management, identification, or remediation as part of our muscle memory, right? And we just do it as part of it. It's not extra. And we all know how to do that. And that gives you the credibility then to, do the other things, the initiatives, the next set, I would say, part of the strategy around advancing our capabilities, right? So we have the basics in place, and then we are constantly looking at the threat environment, how that is changing and how that's impacting United and the commercial aviation industry. And then we're changing, we're changing the bar as we understand what is happening. So for instance, a few years ago when it was destructive attacks, we had to look at our cybersecurity strategy differently. It started off around, as any cybersecurity strategy does, around data protection, right? But those disruptive attacks really made us open our eyes and say we needed a strategy that took into consideration resiliency at a much higher level of priority. So an example was, our segmentation strategy that we were going forward, our network segmentation strategy was based historically on zones, right, of data and sensitivity. This is the PCI zone, the PII zone, whatever, and we would put segmentation and data protection capabilities in. But then as we looked at the changing threat environment, we had to move towards, okay, if it's operational disruption that we're really, really concerned about, how do we put the segmentation around those core operational capabilities and protect our business in that sense of the blast radius? So, it's not just about data protection, but it's about resiliency. So, we're really at the basics. We're understanding our environment to continue to advance our capabilities. And then, of course, we're aligning we're securing the outcomes that the business is going to drive. In our case, it's United Next. As the business is in growth mode, we have, I think 500 or 700, whatever the number is, it keeps growing, planes on order of our connected fleet. And we're changing our customer experience to be much more, seamless and transparent and trusted across our digital channels and the way you interact with our employees and our products. we're making sure that those are built from a secured by design standpoint as well. So it's really around those three prongs that we, look at that transformational strategy, and then we're, achieving and setting those goals and outcomes.
One of the reasons that the Edward Jones opportunity was so appealing to me when I took the role was the firm was looking for an outside-in perspective on our way forward, really asking what we needed to do to future-proof our firm and strive to be one of the best financial services firms in North America. And I had led many transformations in the past and lived to tell about it, but I really felt that the ambition of the firm matched well with my experience. So the approach that I took, really, my first step was to be very thoughtful, continue to learn the firm, and most importantly, not show up with the answers. And I took inspiration from one of our previous managing partners, John Bachman, who in 1997 was actually leading the growth and transformation of the partnership, bringing Wall Street to Main Street. And at the time, he implored the firm to use technology, to help propel our growth and scale, and said, while our focus always should be on the branch team enablement and exceptional client experiences, his quote was perfect. He said, "The war in financial services will not be won because of technology, but it will be lost without it." And so I tried to emulate that rally cry. And over the Christmas holiday in 2018, I wrote a white paper called Changing the Business of Technology, the Imperative for Vertical Transformation. And I was very intentional about using the word business and the word vertical, because in order to transform, we had to change the way that we led technology and how we ran the business of technology end to end and top to bottom, and that's the reason why I talked about vertical transformation with strategic intent. And by making these massive changes, we could help further enable our business to grow and scale and meet those outsized ambitions. But the idea behind it was that we were at an inflection point where, in order to future-proof the firm, we really needed to be bold. We needed to be decisive around what we needed to do to continue to compete and excel. And at the time, when I was writing the narrative, I placed the emphasis on the disruption, the innovation, and the life-enriching technology advances that we had seen at the time. Amazon, Netflix, Apple, Google, even gamification, and how all of those experiences single-handedly changed our lives, and more importantly, how it changed our expectations. And so the challenge that was in front of us was, how do we exceed client and branch team expectations? And the answer became very obvious, right? It was we needed to change everything, right? We needed to modernize and simplify everything we did in order to create the conditions for success for our firm. And so I sort of took a step back and said, how do we rally the firm? So in order to rally the firm, we first needed to talk about our why. What was the why behind all of this? Then the how, and then most importantly, how did the associates see themselves in this opportunity? How could they be part of this transformation? And I know that not everybody loves change, but for me, the whys were indisputable, right? Expectations are higher. If you think about the way that we live today, consumers have access to advanced technology features that you'd say were unimaginable a few years ago, but now are the expectation. Technology literacy, right? It's increased. The user community has matured to the point where we actually have to partner for innovation, right? Technologists no longer own the market on technology or innovation. Leveraging data. I'd say data is the most underutilized asset in many firms. And we needed to use it to create that actionable insight for our financial advisors and clients. And we were really thinking about that well in advance of AI becoming mainstream, as it did last year. But also competition was fierce, right? We saw the advent of new technologies, the commoditization of infrastructure, and that enabled companies to kind of become increasingly nimble and seize opportunities, and also really lowered the barriers to entry for markets. But also many firms were trying to do the exact same thing that we were doing. So we needed to really move with conviction and speed. Also, of course, talent was critical, right? Being able to upskill, retain, attract technology talent in order to maintain our competitive advantage. And we really feel like our people and the currency of trust is always going to be Edward Jones' strategic advantage. We had to modernize to reduce risk, especially when it came to cyber. And then I really felt strongly that technology should elicit this emotional response, right? You know what good technology looks like. So quality software, user experience, that emotive design all become essential value drivers that really align to and help us deliver that ideal Edward Jones client experience. And of course, through all this, as every technologist knows, the focus has got to be on stability, security, and scale being the number one priority. So we pulled all this together, pulled together a plan, pulled together an investment thesis, and that really centered around cloud and mobile first, the quality software design and architecture, DevOps and continuous improvement, what kind of collaboration tools we were going to use, and then build versus buy. So how do we engage third parties versus building everything ourselves? We also had to revamp the connectivity between our branches and home office, and also really move more towards an agile shop that was led by our digital product management teams. And ultimately, we just had to make sure that we had the technology and the talent that would serve as the foundation for the future of our firm. Defined our objectives, we defined our measures, what were those key results that we were striving for, and then we told our story. We told our story inside the firm, outside the firm, and articulated that strategy in both words and actions. And that led us really to where we are today, which is that our unwavering commitment to delivery and execution and adoption. And this has us ready to realize our purpose of partnering for positive impact so we can make a difference in the lives of our clients, colleagues, and the communities that we serve.
Now we're going to turn the attention onto TransUnion CIO Abdi Dar, who we featured in February of 2023. Abdi has mastered the art of balancing ambition and vision. And he does so with a quiet, calm, a gentle humility that only he can manage and muster and perfect. We talked in that episode about strategic planning and how that's different today. We talked about a true transformation journey, and he just peeled back the layers of that and how to lead through transformation. And I really loved how he unpacked why he believes messiness, yes, I did say messiness, leads to opportunities in problem solving. And I think that is just so prophetic as we fast forward now to 2.5 years to 2025 and just think how messy the world is today. So thank you, Abdi, for that. And he continues now today as the Chief Digital Officer of HealthBridge Financial, where he is making his impact there. So let's listen in to this special episode with Abdi.
So transformation involves multiple things. So first is we have to actually transform our technology. Okay. Then second, we have to transform our organization. And then third is we have to make sure, because we started with trust, that whatever we do, we remain trustworthy, whether it's information security, cybersecurity risk, etc. Okay. So I have to look at these three dimensions from a transformation point of view. And in our transformation, we don't just contemplate tech transformation. So our transformation isn't, we're going to use the cloud. That's not, that would be akin to saying, for somebody who's building a house, for them to say, I'm going to use my hammer, and completely ignore the fact that they're building a house. So technology transformation has layers. The first one is we have to transform our infrastructure to be more aligned with the modern reality, which is a multi-cloud hybrid infrastructure. This is not rocket science, right? So if we stay on-prem, we're going to get higher unit cost for utilization. Why are we going to get that? Because we cannot compete in procuring, managing, and running infrastructure at the same scale and competence as Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud, and Microsoft Cloud, which we're not, they're in a gunfight, and, we don't want to enter that. I mean, they have robots that change data center equipment, and, so they will do it better than us, and they will do it cheaper than us, and they can even afford a margin and still be cheaper than us. But it's not just about cheaper, it's more available. And then under that infrastructure layer, over that infrastructure layer, we're building common components. So instead of having an application tied to a particular business purpose, we're creating common components that can be used across multiple places. And these components live on top of any kind of infrastructure, cloud or on-prem. And it may include services that are provided by our cloud service providers like Google and Amazon. And then above that, it's a set of services that we can use to create a solution or a product for a particular marketplace, right? And there's a significant utilization of open source software. There's significant utilization of our own code, which is proprietary, and we have several patents around it. But then this becomes transportable. And when you do that, a couple of things happen. One, things don't fail differently every which way. Things don't have multiple security issues every which way. It becomes more uniform and we can manage it. And people can go from one part of our company to the other, not sort of be stuck. And it becomes more cheaper and efficient. We can get stuff done faster. So that's the tech transformation. But it's also the people transformation. So think about it. We hired somebody in 2020, right? COVID, right? And we're just coming back to the office. So this person who's been in the workforce now for 3 years has no notion of how corporations used to work in the olden times. So we come in and they've heard everything that Elon Musk is doing, and they come into your job in your company, and we tell them, all right, dude, your job is going to be work on this computer that is 30 years old, code that is 15 years old, and you're going to babysit it all night. It's going to run. In the morning, you're going to go see what failed, and you're going to go fix it. So in a talent-constrained environment, that is what we're going to tell a smart engineer who's been 3 years in the workforce. What? So we really need to create an opportunity where the best talent wants to come in here and work, right? So they have to have meaningful work. That's why this transformation is important. They have to line up with our mission. And then the kit we give them, the computers we give them, and how they work has to be similar to what they were doing 3 years ago when they weren't in the corporate workforce, right? And so how do we think about the associate experience? Because our 99% of an employee's associate experience in 2023 is digital. It's Zoom and this, that, and the other thing. So we have to think about that. And when you do that, the best talent wants to work for you. In a talent-constrained environment, if the best talent wants to work for you, you win. And so that's sort of the most important thing. And then if you do all of these things and you have a security breach or a cyber incident or a notification incident, et cetera, you destroy shareholder value. The most important thing, if you don't do these things, if you're not stable, if you're not available, if you have security incidents, if you're not doing all of these things, remember the talent I talked about, that great talent that you hired? Now, instead of doing what they want to do, they're responding to audits, regulatory compliance, fixing security issues, availability issues. It's just, life gets very boring. And that's all your teams are spending your time doing. So that's transformation. It is to be able to do meaningful work for the smartest people in the easiest way, such that we deliver value to our customers faster in a highly available, secure way. And if everybody did it, it would be easy. That's why we have to transform in order to be able to achieve that.
Well, welcome back. And wasn't that special? Avi is just a unique, one-of-a-kind, special human. Make sure you go listen and watch his episode. As we transition to this next segment, it's going to be a double segment. There's been so much interest by the Tech Whispers audience in all things related to talent, workforce strategy, the CIO role, how that's shaping and morphing, and the state of our industry. And the way we did that was kind of fun. We brought some of the top executive recruiters together to talk about these topics through their lens. You're going to hear from, in this first one, Martha Heller. You know Martha, she is a thought leader in the industry, author. She writes prolifically, does a lot of speaking, and also Sean Banerjee. Sean's a good friend. I remember one of Sean's quotes. He said, if you've seen one CIO job description, you've seen one CIO job description. Just talking about how these roles are so different in every company. It's just a really interesting perspective. And then the second segment will be with Martha and just really helping you expand and build and add to your toolkit. So listen in to these two special segments.
What we're seeing right now with, ChatGPT and a lot of the excitement around AI is to some extent, a industry and a vendor community which is looking to monetize something that has in fact been around for some time, and is perhaps still not quite as ready for prime time as some of the vendors might like buyers and influence to believe. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Vector Institute in Toronto. So the Vector Institute is one of, if not the leading AI ML research institute in the world. And we've done some work for them. We're involved in a really unique pilot with them around how AI and ML can be incorporated into talent and hiring. And there's a gentleman there, his name is Jeffrey Hinton. And Jeffrey Hinton is a PhD in artificial intelligence. He was running something called the Neuro Computation and Adaptive Perception Program at the University of Toronto. This was, funded by the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. And he had his own neural network startup called DNN Research, which kind of was spawned from that work at the University of Toronto. And Google actually acquired that company in 2013, and it has served as really the foundation for Google's AI and ML deep learning programs. Take a guess when Jeffrey Hinton earned his PhD in artificial intelligence. And I'm not even going to ask you, Dan or Martha, what year. You just give me the decade.
70s.
No,
Correct.
say 90s.
1978.
Wow.
Okay. So there's a PhD in artificial intelligence in 1978 that was earned at the University of Edinburgh, right? So this wasn't, if you want to think that, Silicon Valley is the epicenter or that, this is all new, that's simply not the case. The research, the heavy lifting that's been invested in this field has been going on for decades. There's an incredible book about the emergence of Silicon Valley and the parallel of the microchip called Chip Wars, which I'd also say is required reading. And what you learn is that these things have been happening. There's been a cadence and a pace to innovation as far as neural networks and AI and ML is concerned. But we reached a inflection point, and I think some of this was economically motivated, where we saw certain technology emerge. It immediately kind of came into the hands of consumers versus a commercial or professional customer base, which and today with social media, it spread like wildfire. And companies looked at that and said, "Hey, we've got a fantastic opportunity to monetize this phenomenon." So I think that, we're in a period now where we are still early days. If we're on a journey, the ship is still, we can look back and still see land. But to your specific question about these titles, these are, these titles will remain. They will evolve and morph over time. But this is a field that will be, a central catalyst for, how business is conducted and how, human beings go about living their lives, whether we like it or not. I certainly don't have the hubris to pretend I have any kind of monopoly on, let alone the right answers or even commenting on it beyond as an observer. I'm fascinated. I'm a believer. But I am not sure in what time frame we're going to actually see the application pay off in a real world measurable manner for us.
And Sean, I agree with everything you say there. And what I would add, look, insurance companies have been running AI for claims processing for years and years and years. But now it's in the public consciousness. Now it's in the hands of consumers. So, what I think will be very interesting going forward is, well, let me say it this way. Way back in the day when I was at CIO Magazine, I had a column called Sound Off. And this was back when the internet was just coming around. and uh, the dean of a Ivy League divinity school had pornography on his computer. And so the IT folks came in, and then they had to deal with, what are we going to do about this? So what was so interesting about that was, because now you've got all this privacy and access problems, issues coming in from the internet, IT is put in a position of having to make some ethical choices, which seemed odd to me. So I sort of raised that as a discussion. That's where we're headed with AI. The ethical discussion about AI and when does everything's been technology for technology's sake, or rather technology innovation at all costs. Yes, we pay attention to information security because we know that that can be a challenge, but we haven't really thought a lot about the ethical implications of the internet, the ethical implications of doing everything on your phone. Now ask a parent of a young person, and they might say there are a lot of ethical implications to the fact that children live digital lives now. But I think what we're going to see, which I think has been absent from a discussion of technology innovation for a very long time, is what are the ethics behind, when the robots rule the world.
Oh, Martha, you know, no truer words, right? I mean, with the deep fake technology that's now proliferating, and I remember, seeing the Terminator movie in the theater and thinking, Skynet, boy, what a crazy world. Well, we've got drones, we've got, ubiquitous, Wi-Fi and connectivity. I mean, we're not that far off from, in fact, we may even have surpassed what was considered science fiction within our own lifetime, right?
That's right. And we have a technocracy. And I believe that I coined that word, Dan. Try to give me credit on that one. Where we have a technocracy where who is making the decisions about how the role technology plays in our lives. These are not necessarily people trained in ethics or even in the humanities. These are coders who are making decisions about how we humans should be living our lives. So here comes another word, another apt use of the word interesting.
Every time I interview a CIO, I ask them to define their role. What is the impact they're having? What is the role all about? Lately, what I'm hearing most often is chief value officer. Once you're able to get out of the business of delivering technology onto business users who consume it, and you create a structure of product management, a structure of democratization of data, democratization of IT. So you're not always responding to requests. You're creating an environment where your business users can help themselves, whether it's RPA, whether it's data visualization, whatever it is. Well, then what are you going to do with your time? It's consulting to each area of the business to say, what can technology do for this part of the business, and making sure the governance is there so that everybody isn't reinventing the wheel all over the place. I did an interview with Bonnie Smith, who was the CIO of Lear Corporation until she moved to be the CIO of Tech Data. And what she had done is created something she called SOS, which was I don't remember what the acronym was now, to be honest, but it was really an RPA self-service model. So what she had is 270 plants around the world, and they each kept doing their own RPA. And so she's looking around, and I love the way she put it. She said they were innocently creating shadow IT. So what she did was she put in a whole model, which took a long time. It took a lot of vendor negotiation because it was a different kind of role for vendors. She had RPA tools and training installed in each one of the plants, 270 plants. And then IT's role was to provide the guardrails and the governance and to make sure that each RPA solution developed was checked in to almost a repository or clearinghouse so that we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. So that if a plant in Asia Pac was creating something, she could say, the folks in Germany have already done that. Why don't you all get together and talk about it? And at the end of that whole interview, I realized, wow, she's not delivering technology. She's creating an opportunity for the business to have their own technology, which frees her up and her team to really be strategic internal technology consultants. So that is one changing role to Larry's question. But another one that I would bring up is Rhonda Gass at Staley Black and Decker. When I asked her this question, she talked about her role as chief risk officer. Because speaking of digital transformation, at Stanley Black and Decker, they've got IoT in their products. They're collecting customer information all over the place. Every time you create an IoT opportunity in a business unit, you create a security issue or a potential for a security issue. There's risk every time you sort of open the door to external partners and customers. So now she's seeing her role, again, not as, no one talks about their role anymore as deploying technology or running an IT organization. It's about creating in the business a capability around governance, around risk, around value. And the last one I'll bring up is, just to, you mentioned my interest in history, just going back to the CIO role. When it first came out, it was really almost, an accidental CIO where, oops, I wrote a piece of software to do, automate a process. I'm the MIS director, and then I'm CIO. In about 1987 was our first CIO. And then after that, when it became more about ERP, it was technology deployment. Less about software engineering and more about business process change and large program management. Along comes .com. Now we're thinking more about business models. We're thinking about the customer. Here we are in the age of data. As much as digital, we're in the age of data. Now CIOs need to be all about the customer. They need to be all about internal processes. But they also need to be strong architects, because a flexible, adaptable, microservices, modular, API-oriented architecture, whether CEOs know this or not, is key. Everything else that we've been talking about. So ironically, to Larry's question, it was at first CIOs needed to be technical. Then they needed to be business-oriented. Then they needed to be customer-oriented. Guess what? Now they need to be all of that, but that technical capability has come right around again. And so I would say CIOs actually, I wouldn't say they need to be engineers. They have to have an engineering mindset, and they do need to understand architectural issues.
Again, as I was working with my team here, we just thought, close this out, this special celebration of the best would be most appropriate to shine the light once again on the CIO GOAT, Rob Carter. Rob, we all know that FedEx, almost 30 years, 25 years as the CIO of one of the most incredible companies on the planet. And as we all know, that's about 6 times the average of a CIO. We featured Rob back in the November of 2024, and I think you just got to dig in and get back to the full episode. But listen to this snippet and all of the leadership wisdom, the encouragement, the nuggets, the learnings that he shared. So, Rob, thank you again for being so generous with your time.
This is a relatively new construct for me. It's something that I, popped into my head at one point, really sort of towards the end of my tenure at FedEx. And so what occurred to me was that, we all learned early on about IQ, and it's important to be smart. It is, without a doubt, people in our industry are smart. Some of the smartest people I know are practitioners of what we do. But we also then, as time marched on, and especially as culture became such an important part of it, we started talking about EQ, your emotional quotient. How relatable are you? How well do you work with people? How well can you put together a story or context or communicate effectively in ways that, and show empathy. Empathy is one of the most important characteristics of the human condition, is the ability to feel what it's like to wake up behind someone else's eyes. and have compassion about the things that people go through. And so we spent quite a bit of time on IQ and EQ. But then there was this third Q that arrived. A couple of friends of mine started talking about it. Todd Martin at Unboundary was one of the first people that I saw talk about it. And he talked about adaptability. And so the third Q is the AQ, the adaptability quotient. And remember, as we talked about Toffler and we talked about these waves of technology and we talked about how people react to them, both positively and negatively, a lot of that has to do with your AQ. How adaptable are you to morphing and changing? When we talked about Michael Dell and Fred Smith, we talked about learn, adapt, learn, adapt, learn, adapt, the learn, adapt cycle. And, the great leaders that I know are all adaptive. They all, you mentioned Fred and, kind of from this crazy startup, as a young man recently retired from the military, to this behemoth that connects the world today. Trust me, that required a great deal of adaptation along the way. You had to get rid of stuff that had once made the company work and made it great. And you had to move on to new concepts, open up a wider aperture for what the world would need. And, so Q cubed was the moniker I tagged to it now, and saying that the complete leader is someone who's got good IQ and good EQ and excellent AQ these days, because the world is changing fast and you have to adapt fairly quickly. You don't forget the past, but you don't just clutch at it either, because that would be a problem.
Thank you so much, Rob Carter. What a great friend. What a legend. What a leader. So much we've learned from Rob, and he just continues to be a bright light in our industry, our profession. He's doing his board work, and just wish him well in these next chapters. And I want to thank you, our audience, because your encouragement has been so meaningful to us, the team here. Your passion for what we do, and just for sharing Tech Whispers with your network, with your friends. Because let's face it, without you, there's no podcast. So here's my promise to you. We have a year. The next year is full of amazing guests. And so come back, join us for the next time. It'll be a new guest, new content, new wisdom, new brilliance. And I just can't wait for you to hear it. And I promise you, my goal is to continue to educate, to continue to instigate and agitate a little bit, and to inspire you on your journey. So with that, I wish you well, and we will see you all again next time.